React developers often encounter scenarios where they must have passed props from a top level component to a deeply nested component. And if you also have faced this issue and you want to get rid from it, then this session is for you, because in this video we are going to talk about how you can avoid prop drilling with the help of useContext hook. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Nisha Singla, and in this video we are going to talk about useContext hook. In our previous videos we have already covered about useState, useEffect, useReducer hooks, and you can check out those videos because those are very important hooks. And now in the last video I told you about one problem of prop drilling with the help of useReducer hook. So to get it that problem, we can use context hook. So today's session is completely about use context hook. Once you will understand it, in the next video I will combine use reducer along with use context to show you how when you combine both hooks can definitely improve your code. So let's start with today's session, and that is use context hook. React is all about components, right? We will be having parent component, child component, and further child component, right? So this diagram is very clear, like we have one root component, component 1, and similarly it has two child component 2 and component 3, and this hierarchy keep on adding up to component 6. Now just assume my component 1 want to communicate to my component 6, that is a innermost child, right? So in that case, usually what we do in React, we pass or we create some prop in the component 1, and then we pass it to component 3, then component 3 will further pass it down to component 4, and then component 4 will pass it down to component 6. So do you see a problem here? We are repeating our data or passing down the data from top to child like this. And logically, if you think, ideally the data is in the component 1 and my component 6 want to use that. But as this hierarchy is like that, so in that case component 3 and component 4 also need to hold that data. Ideally component 3 and component 4 is not even using that data. So it is unnecessary, we have to pass down the data to component 3 and component 4 so that it can reach to the component 6. So when you pass your prop like this from one component to another component and to all the intermediate component, this concept is called prop drilling. So prop drilling refer to the process of sending props from a top level or higher level component to a lower level component. So this could not be an issue when you have a very small hierarchy, like 2 or 3 components, 4 or 5 components. But if you are handling a very big application, in that case this hierarchy will also increase. So in those situations, passing down the data in this format is really difficult, because in this case we are duplicating the code and it's really difficult to track the data from where it is coming, right? We have to check every hierarchy. So ideally this is not the recommended way for a big application. So now we understood that prop drilling is not good. Ideally we use it, but of course when application grow, then we have to take care about prop drilling as well. So to get rid from prop drilling, let's discuss what could be the solution. The first solution is you can have a global state management like Redux. It's a third-party library, or we can maintain some global state with the help of useContext hook. So React also has a concept of context which let you create something like a global data store, and any component in the context can have access to the data store. So in this session we are going to talk about how we can use context hook to share some data across the component without passing down in the props or without implementing prop drilling. So open your editor. In the last video we have created this useReducer hook. Now let's quickly create one more folder with the name of useContext hook. So let's create one component inside this file. So here I'll create a maybe with the name of users dashboard, and let's quickly create this component. And now we have to link it with our app.js. So instead of this to-dos component, let's import users dashboard component, and we can replace our component here as well. Save the changes and check on your browser. Here we are, use context hook. Okay. In this hierarchy, I have one component. Let's create one more component here so that I can create multiple components. Then I will show you how we can pass down the data without using props. Okay. So here, let's talk about, I have users component now. and one more component with the name of detail.js. It will not do anything as of now. It's just a very simple component so that I can show you how exactly it's going to work. And one more component, detail. So we can copy this one and we can just replace it with details. So we have created three components. Let's do the linking. User dashboard from app, user dashboard will call, and from user dashboard I will call my users component. Let's import this one here. Now within this users component, I will call this detail component. Save the changes and check on your browser. So you can see we have user context, use context hook, users and details. So all these three components are working. Now ideally just assume from this user dashboard component I have some data, maybe that data coming from some API or the data I have maintained in some configuration file. It could be anything. So that data I want to pass to my users component or maybe to detail component. So ideally how we use, we create some prop here, right, and we pass some data like this. So this prop will go to users component, then users component will receive it from here and then it can use that. Or further, if detail component need that, then again users component has to pass that prop data to the detail component also with the help of prop. So this way we have to pass down all the data from parent to child with the help of props. So that we don't want because this is called prop drilling. So to avoid that, let's see what could be the other way. So when we talk about a use context hook, it basically work on two things, providers and consumers, right? As a name suggests, provider means who is going to provide the value, fine. So if my child component needs the data, then provider will provide the value. So all your components that need the data should wrap into that provider. So if provider is not there, then the child component will not be able to get the data. So provider is important. So the first step will be the provider. You have to create the provider and you have to pass the data to the provider so that provider can further pass down all the data to all its consumers. So the next term here is consumer. Consumer means who is going to consume those context data, right? So if I have passed some data from provider, so to use that data in the respective child components, your child component should consume it. So that is called provider and consumers. Now, where exactly you can use this context API, that is also very important to understand. I will talk more about it later, but just to simplify, if you have anything that you want to maintain globally, like some themes if you have, or some user you want to maintain is authenticated or sign out, login, these kind of functionality, there you can use this use context hook. It has some drawbacks which we have to definitely look into that, but I will discuss about it at the end of the video. So I don't want to complicate it as of now. First, let's understand the concept only, okay? Let me show you the steps also quickly so that I can implement for you. So the first step is, so implementing a use context hook is very simple. It's just a three-step process, okay? Two steps I have already told you. Let's talk about all these three steps. So the first step is you have to create a context. Okay, creating a context is very simple. You just need to import create context and you have to export it. Now you have to create a provider. Provider means from your root component, wherever you want to share the data to all the child, you have to create a provider, right? So you just need to create a provider, context provider, and then you have to pass down the data with the help of value property. This value property is mandatory. You cannot pass anything else, right? Otherwise it will not work. And here in the value you can pass anything that you want to pass to all the consumers. So within this provider, all those components can get this data by consuming it. So the third step is you have to consume it with the help of use context hook. Fine. With the help of use context hook, you can read that context that you have created and it will return you the data that you have passed with the help of provider. So it's just a three-step process and I have just simplified for you with the help of this Instagram post. You can check it out my Instagram page as well for more detail. But now let's move to our code and implement this one. So as I told you, ideally we create provider here in the app file, right? But let's assume that users dashboard is the root component for you so that you don't confuse why I have created providers here. Okay. Now let's create one folder and I'm giving it a name of context because we can have multiple contexts, right? So it's good to have it in a separate folder. And here I will create one file with the name of user context. I'll keep it again very simple. I just want to hold a username. And that username I want to pass down to all the child component without prop drilling. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So to use context, first step is you have to create the context. So for that you have to import create context from React package. So this is your create context, and here you can say const user context equals to create context. Now create context basically take one parameter that is a default value for your context. It is not mandatory, right? But if you want that you want to pass down your context with some default value, if it not able to find any provider, in that case what value will go, here you can provide that default value. Okay, just for now I'm just putting null, though you can pass any default value. This value will not change, it will remain static. Fine. Now from here you have to export your context. So this is the first step, creating a context. So creating a context is very simple. You just need to import create context, and then on this create context you have to create a reference of this variable and you just need to export it. Create context take one default value which will act like a default value for your context. So the next step is creating a provider. Provider will provide value to this context so that child component can use it. So for us, I will create provider in the user's dashboard. Again, it is not mandatory that you have to use in the root component. It's totally up to you. If you want to share some data only with the child components that getting called from user's dashboard, then you will give the provider here. So you can decide the design where exactly or how exactly you want to use. Okay, so my requirement is to use context within these components. So that's why I will wrap my provider here. So let's see how to use that. So to create a provider, I simply need that context that I have created. So what is the name of my context? This user context. Okay, so what I'll do, I will say user context. It will import here. Now what you have to do, you need to wrap your components within a provider, right? So for that, what you need to do, you need to use this context, that is user context dot provider. And same thing you have to do here. And after that, I created the provider, but I have to pass down the value also, right? So it has a value property and it can take anything here. Let's create one variable username and the value is Nisha. So this username, I want to pass down to my components. So this will act like a value for me here, username. You just need to import your created context. After that, on this context, you have to call provider. Provider will give you one value property which will be the data that you want to share. And now as soon as you did this one, so all those components that will get called from here, that will have access to this data with the help of consumer, and that we will do with the help of use context hook. So now first let's check up to here the UI is working. Let's open the console tab. Okay, it looks fine. Now first I want to access the name inside my users.js. For an example, okay, I want to display here username. So for that I need to get that data that I have created in the context. So for that again you have to import your context that you have created, user context, and the next one is you have to import use context hook. With the help of use context hook, the consumer part is really simple now. You don't need to do a lot of stuff for that. You just need to import use context hook from React and you are good to go. So now all you have to do, you just need to say your use context hook, and use context hook will take your context that you have created, and I have created the context with the name of user context. That's it. So now if you see this data will be exactly what you have passed to the value from here. I have done a console.log just to show you. Let's see. You can see here Nisha is coming, right? So now here I can say data. So here we are. So you can see it's very simple. And if you noticed here, there is no prop I have passed to this users, but still I'm able to pass the data from here, from my root component to my respective child components. So as I told you, you can pass anything from here. So you can also pass a object. If I get it from this one, if I say something like this, users, and here I said username, Nisha, right? It's an object. So even this one is also valid. You can pass this object here. Fine. If you check it now, go to the console. You can see it's the object which have a username property. So now we have to fix it here, data dot, fine. So it's correct. So you can pass anything as per your design, whatever you are working on, right? So this is totally up to you how or what kind of data you want to pass from here. So as of now, if you noticed here, we have this username which is static, right? But sometime we want to update the data that we have passed via context. So it's very simple. All you have to do, you just need to combine it with your states. So maybe this data is coming from a state, that data I'm passing to my context. So that can also be done. Okay. So maybe this username data I'm getting from my, suppose this username data I'm getting from state, right? So how we can do that? Just simply create a state for that. I will use useStateHook for now. And here I can say const users or maybe set users. So now instead of passing it hard-coded like this, I can pass it my prop like this. Okay. And rest will remain same. So as of now, its initial value is empty. So it will also empty, right? If I pass something here, some default value, you will notice it will get populated here. And of course, if you want to modify it, you can have a button, you can update this state, right? If you want to have that control here only, then it's good. You can have a button here and you can attach a on click and you can call this set users and you can update the value, and maybe the value, new value is maybe full name Nisha Singla. Save the changes. And initially its value is empty because there is nothing. As soon as I click on this update name, it will get updated. So updating a context value is very simple. You just need to combine it with your states. Either it is useStateHook or useReducer hook. Okay. So now what exactly we want? We want that set users should be able to call from my details so that I can update my state. So it means your detail component should have access of this set users. So I'm not passing it through props, right? We are not using prop drilling. So the another way is, let's give this function to your provider, to your context, so that I can access it from there. So what we can do, we can say update name and it will refer to this set users method. Okay. We can get it from here for now. Let's give it initial value as Nisha. So if you want to use context in the detail, the rule will remain same. You have to do the same thing that we have done with users component, that you have to import useContext and your created context. So the same thing I have to do here. I have to import my useContext so that I can use the context. And you have to import your created context as well, that is user context. And now you will get something out of your context, right? With the help of useContext, passing down your created context, that is user context. If you do quickly console.log data to find out what exactly it is returning, ideally it should return what we have passed from here, and that is my this object. Okay, let's see that. You can see here in the details, we have username as Nisha, that is my state value, and update name is a function. Okay, so it means I got this update name reference as well. So if I see here, it is returning two things, username and update name. I don't need username, I just need update name, so I can say update name. object restructuring syntax, right? And take out only those things which is required. So I'll have a button here and I'll say change name or update name. I'll add an event here and I'll call this update name from here, and just maybe I'm passing some value. You can handle it in a much better way, just to show you this example. So let's check this one. Initially the value is Nisha, and update name is a button that we have added in the details component. Clicking on that will update my context value and it will update the state as well. Here we are. So that's how you can combine your context with your state to make it more useful. So I hope you understood how useContext hook is working. So let me talk about few things that you need to remember when you are working with useContext hook, so that you don't do those mistakes that can happen. Okay. The first rule is you cannot pass anything else here. It should always be value. Fine. The another important point you need to remember, the default or the fallback value that I have mentioned here. Sometimes what happened that your child component may directly trying to consume something, right? And for that the provider is not there. So in that case your UI will not break or your logic will not break. At least it will take this default context for you. So it will act like a fallback value. That is important. And the another part is overriding the context for a part of your tree, right? Sometime, as I mentioned here in the user dashboard, all your component, maybe future we have multiple components here that will get called. And for all those components, it will act like a provider. Sometime I want that for specific component, my provider should different. So in that case, you can wrap your component into that provider. Because whenever you mention any component, it will always look to the nearest provider for it. So just for an example, if I created one more context, maybe in future, I'll say maybe customer context dot provider, okay, and I'll pass some value from here, just like that, okay, like this. And I want that I have a customer component also in future in the same hierarchy, but I don't want that for the customer the provider is same. I want that it should have a provider of this one. So I want that customer should use this provider. So that is also okay. You can override the context by referring it like this, because all your component will always check the immediate provider. So for customer, immediate provider is this one, not this one. And the another important point is, see, everything will come with some pros and cons, right? I told you the pros thing, like it will help us to avoid the prop drilling when you use context hook. It also has some drawback. You should be very careful when you are using this hook. Here when you use user context, ideally it is used for those values which are very static or update very less. So in that case use context is okay, because use context hook also re-render, right? Whenever there is a change in the context value, all the underlying component that is using that context will get re-render. So from this you need to understand two things, like keep your context separate. For one specific thing, create a separate context. Now suppose for an example, in the user context, if I create a whole new object, a very big object that contain the user detail, authentication detail, or maybe some customer default name, theming, everything if I maintain in one file. So maybe my one component just need the user data, but because it contains lots of other contexts, so from anywhere in the application, if any of the context change, all those components that is using this context will get changed, even when it was not meant to be re-rendered. So it's a very big problem, right? Do you understand it? For a small application, it's fine. But for a big application, if re-rendering happen it like this, it will really impact the performance. So ideally, when you use the context, try to create or divide your context into smaller parts. That's why I have created a separate folder so that you can create multiple contexts as per the need. So re-rendering is an issue when we talk about context. So just to conclude this one, whenever you use context hook, of course re-rendering will be there. If the context value change, then all the components that using that context will get re-render. Okay, so one practice is always create separate context for separate use. Don't mix everything in one context. Okay, and another one is, even if you divide it into multiple contexts, still re-rendering will be there for the specific context itself, right? So in that case, you have to combine other hooks with use context hook like use memo and use callback so that we can control the re-rendering part. So I hope you understood it. What is use context hook? It is basically to avoid the prop drilling. With this, you can maintain some global data which you can share across all the child component without prop drilling. Again, it comes with some drawback that can be catered with the help of other components when you combine together. So in the next video, I will be talking about the useReducer hook that we have discussed in the last video, and I'll combine useReducer hook with useContext hook to show you how we can really use that all together. So this is all for today. I hope you found it useful. If yes, then do let me know in the comment section. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, keep learning.